Meredith, look at this picture and see if you...
Jim and Mary Ann Wortmann grew up in farming families in northeast Nebraska. They have both served as directors on their local NRD board and at the statewide level. Through the NRD's Conservation Tree Program, they have planted shelter belts and a living snow fence on their farm outside of Crofton.
The county approached us about putting some trees in, and they request that you put it back like 200 yards from the road in order to stop the snow from accumulating on the road.
We planted them, they were just little bitty seedlings, and then we put weed barrier around it. The tree was a little bit in the middle, and they had that weed barrier around the outside, this big around, which would grow with weeds. So consequently, we would come out here and we would weed that.
When we first moved out here and when we were first married, I was a 22-year-old bride, and we were out in the living shelter belt weeding those little bitty trees. And I remember looking at Chris and, tears rolling down my face, going, oh, I didn't think this was what marriage was. It's so hard and so much work. And
it was a job.
Since the NRDs began in 1972, there have been more than 95 million trees and shrubs planted across the state through the NRD Conservation Tree Program.
It's great habitat. There are pheasants in there. There are all kinds of wildlife in there, and it's been a good thing for the farm.
Trees also provide shade and protection for homes, reduce energy costs, prevent soil erosion, and improve water and air quality. But in ranch country, too many trees can have a negative impact on grassland for cattle.
Our place that we operate on has been in our family 125 years. And I guess that resource management is something that's been a top priority.
In the Upper Niobrara-White Natural Resources District, helping landowners with trees is one of their main activities.
We're constantly trying to educate people on put the right tree in the right spot, where it'll grow, where it's native to, how far apart to space it, how close the rows can be together, just to make sure you get the best survivability you can.
2 years ago, this used to be our East Cedars pasture, and we've cleared it out almost completely. There's still a few popping around, but that's an ongoing project and a concern here.
All over the state, there's about 40,000 acres a year of expansion of those cedar tree growths, particularly in central eastern Nebraska.
Nothing grows underneath them. They're taking water and nutrients from the ground. And every time that we've cleared an area, we've seen significant improvement.
You've got to keep that manageable to where it's a kind of a proper mix between the trees. The cows like the shade, and I like them too, but you've got to keep the right mix.
And that pasture, the whole thing is just lifted by now. And
your pastures all look very good.
Oh, thanks.
Natural resources districts are always working with landowners to mitigate negative human impact on the environment. They also contend with the impacts of natural forces like fire and wind.
The Pine Ridge came to be known, famous for its pine trees. We get very little moisture out here. Soils are pretty shallow and there's not a lot of nutrients, so it takes a long time to get a tree established. Behind me is the aftermath of the 2012 wildfires.
During the fires in 2012, we had 1,000 acres on our ranch burned. Kind of difficult to deal with, mainly because those trees, they kind of become a part of you when you been in and around and under them all your life, and all of a sudden all they are is a black stem standing there.
The district has really worked with landowners to put trees back onto the landscape. It took a long time for the Pine Ridge to get to where it was, and it's going to take a long time to get it back into that condition.
On the Ridenour Ranch in the Upper Loup Natural Resources District, their fate can change with the wind.
This is a true Nebraska sandhills blowout.
We are on sand dunes just because they have cover on them. The early settlers say when they first came, the tops of the hills were all bare.
This sugar sand that we're standing in blows very easily, so it doesn't take much for it to be whipping around. An opening from a bull hole, cow trail, road, anything will start to blow out. And that's the main goal we have here, is to try to stop this from happening all over the place, and if it is happening, to make it recover. The NRD was crucial in the initial phase of setting up our rotational grazing. They helped us realize that the plants need time to recover. Before that, we would graze the cows in each pasture from May till end of October, and the grasses would never recover. The windmill areas would always be beaten down because cows were coming in constantly every day. And so they were very helpful in opening our eyes up to different ways of how to manage the place.
People will ask, how many acres you have. Well, that's not the question. The question is, how many acres does it take to raise a cow? So that's the key there. You have to know the limits of what it can do.
With help from the Upper Loup NRD education and cost share programs, the Ridenours implemented rotational grazing. They fenced smaller pastures and moved the cattle more often. That gives the grass more time to recover.
This blowout we're standing in used to be 20 times the size it is now. Hopefully in another 20 years, it will all be grass.